by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, of so-called saints and respectable gentlemen of the three higher castes. And when the power of government is transferred to the hands of ministers elected from the low-born Shudra class, or those less than them,
and when nothing is known of the techniques of sacrifice, even by word, at that time the Lord will appear as the supreme chastiser. Purport. The symptoms of the worst conditions of the material world, at the last stage of this age, called Kali Yuga, are stated herein. The sum and substance of such conditions is godlessness.
the so-called saints and higher castes of the social orders, generally known as the Dvijajanas, or the twice-born, will become atheists. As such,
Will practically forget even the holy name of the Lord, and what to speak of his activities. The higher castes of society, namely the intelligent class of men, guiding the destinies of the social orders, the administrative class of men guiding the law and order of the society, and the productive class of men,
economic development of the society, must all be properly well-versed in knowledge of the Supreme Lord, knowing factually his name, qualities, pastimes, entourage, paraphernalia, and personalities. The saints and the higher castes or orders of the society are judged by their proportion of knowledge in the science of God, or tattvajnana, and not by any kind of birthright or bodily designations. Such designations, without any knowledge of the science of God and practical knowledge of devotional service, are considered to be all decorations of dead bodies. And when there is too much inflation of these decorated dead bodies in society, there develop so many anomalies in the progressive, peaceful life of the human being. Because of the lack of training or culture in the upper section of the social orders, they are no more to be designated as the Dvijajanas, or the twice-born. The significance of being twice-born has been explained in many places in this great literature. And again, one is reminded herewith that birth executed by the sex life of the father and mother is called animal birth. But such animal birth and progress of life on the animal principles
will be the very or the uncultured lower class of men of society.
Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Vivishakhanvitamscha
Krishna Karuna Sindho
Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhi Evata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namine. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishekha Shinyavari Pashkati Deshakarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Going over today is about Kalki Avatar. It is an avatar of Lord Vishnu who appears at the end of Kali Yuga, which Kali Yuga is this present age we are in now, at the tail end of the
cyclical group of time when irreligious
civilization is becoming degraded more and more day by day. Yuga at the end of this age,
the last incarnation of this age, Kalki Avatar comes
and as says by Srila Prabhupada,
mercilessly slays the atheist.
the government. And after Kalki Avatar slays these rulers, the next Satya Yuga
comes about. And so the Vedic conception of time is cyclical. It's not linear. There's 4 yugas. And Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And then after Kali Yuga comes Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, Kali Yuga, like this. It's cyclical. And so when Kalki Avatar comes, he slays the miscreants, and Satya Yuga sets it again. So Srila Prabhupada, he starts off the purport by saying the symptoms of the worst conditions of the material world at the last stage of this age, called Kali Yuga, are stated herein. The sum and substance of such conditions is godlessness. So we can see in today's world, the government is godless. The world at large is godless. In America, there's this conception of separation between the church and the state. So this originally was a thing because we called
America from Great Britain, they were being chastised by the religious rulers in Britain. And so therefore they're called the Protestant church. They protested against the church. And so they set up colonies here in America as a new religion, you know. They're following their own faith and they wanted religious freedom. Therefore they sought new land, new sovereignty. So they came to America. And the rest is history. When they finally established the official United States of America government, the separation of church and state was fundamental because these colonists had past experience of suppression by the government. They were forcing them to follow particular religion which they didn't want to adhere to. And so we see this in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc. And then also the Establishment Clause, which Thomas Jefferson established in 1802. And here it explicitly was said the separation of church and state. But we see that once Protestantism was established, then that was the form of government here in the United States. And if you didn't want to be a Protestant, or you didn't want to be a traditional Christian of that sort of line, then you were extricated from society. You were an outcast. And so we see the church of, the Quaker church, the Church of Quakerism, I think it's called. And the Quakers, they were outside of the realms of traditional Christianity, so to say, and more than teaching about God and pastimes in the Bible and whatnot, they stressed sub-religious principles. We talked about sub-religious principles yesterday in Buddhism, things like morality and philosophy. Um, so the fundamental principles of Quakerism are simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. Nowhere in this is anything having to do with God. God isn't the foundation of this religion, Quakerism, but it's more so just moral codes, how to live your life. So we understand this is sub-religious principles. Real religion means sarva dharma parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva pape pyo mokshayishami mahitaha. Abandoning all varieties of religion and surrendering unto Krishna, dovetailing everything in Krishna's service. This is real religion. It's surrender unto God.
And so the Church of the Quaker people, they were expelled from society, therefore they sought religious freedom in Rhode Island. So Rhode Island, this was the states within the United States that allowed for this religious freedom. I myself, I have actually gone to a Quaker meeting. I had a friend growing up who was born a Quaker and grew up in that church. And my mother took me there a few times because she used to go. But basically at least the modern Quaker church, they teach these sub-religious principles. And part of their teaching is that, no matter which religion you come from, no matter which faith you come from, you come to be part of our community. We'll talk about modern issues, and we'll, establish simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And so this consists of people from all different faiths. Even atheists can go to Quaker meetings. And so this allows for religious freedom. This allows for religious freedom, the Quaker church that is. But it doesn't excuse one from ideological freedom. Because by accepting, it's still a doctrine, no matter which faith you come from, we can still talk about community, equality, whatever. You come, you please come, whatever you do, whatever works for you, please do that. That's good for you, that'll make you happy. If you wanna live your life as an alcoholic, you do you as long as you're happy. So this is an ideology in itself, that no matter what you do, no matter what you believe in, you can be happy. Whatever works for you. Different things work for different people. This is the ideology. And if there is no absolute truth, if everything is just relative truth, then that ideology basically implicitly states that nothing is truth. If anything is truth, if anything you want can be truth, then in actuality nothing is truth. Because according to that ideology, truth is just some man-made mental concept. And what is the mind? It's just thin air. No truth really exists. So if you follow this ideology of everybody believe their own things, whatever works for you, then that itself is an ideology. So it's impossible to avoid this groupthink. Groupthink is a sociological term where it means that people, they don't think for themselves, so to say, but they more so just go along with whatever trend is going on. And this is inevitable. We see the Protestant church renounced England and came to America because they wanted freedom, but then the Protestant church itself there was a social institution created out of that, whereby the Quakers, they wanted freedom from that, and then it goes on and on. As I believe it's one founder of sociology, he says there's the charismatic, there's the institutional phase, and there's the charismatic phase. The charismatic phase comes first, where things are spur of the moment created out of inspiration, things are really lively. And then once an institution forms around that, then the charisma is gradually lost from that institution. And so, this is the trend in history, and the point I'm trying to lay down here is that it's impossible to avoid groupthink. Even if you say everybody thinks for themselves, that itself is an ideology. So it's impossible to avoid this groupthink. And in the modern world, it's called secularism, the secular government, the secular institutional system. It's secular, which means there's no ideology. Everything is, you know, not pushing people into a specific ideology, but more so, we welcome all ideologies, but we're going to teach this. We welcome all ideologies, and we're going to teach our own ideology. So this is the secular state. And the doctrine is of atheism. Like I said, this idea that we're all individuals, we all think differently, whatever works for you, do it, if that makes you happy. This is a worldview that excludes the idea of God, secularism. That there's no absolute truth. So secularism is a worldview that excludes the idea of God. It's a worldview. It's an ideology. And we see in the modern world that, the theory of evolution is taught. And so many other atheistic theories. And you go right down the street, on the left, there's a big, I think it's a middle school, brand new building, so polished, so new, so many people going. Brand new buildings, so millions of dollars probably went into that project. And then right across the street, there's an abandoned church. And so we can see by looking at this is the state of the world. And they say that these schools, they're not places of indoctrination and religion, but they're places of free thought. But we see that there's specific curriculums taught there, specific ways to think. And in fact, it's illegal not to be taught those things as a child. As devotees, we want to have Vedic education, Gurukul, and Varnashram College. But we find this difficult with the current laws of the state because it's mandatory. There's certain curriculum that are mandatory, math, history, English. See, there is no freedom of thought. Yeah, so we want to establish homeschooling for our, devotee kids coming into the movement. But the law enforces that atheistic things are taught. And so, this separation of church and state, it's all bogus. There is no separation of church and state because they're forcing ideologies down people's throats. And this itself, atheism, it's an ism, it's an ideology. And so, okay, sure, freedom of religion, fine. I guess we have that. You could be a Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, Scientologist. But freedom of ideology, that's not allowed. People need to be educated, right? They need to be educated. And what does it mean to be educated? It's just up to the standards of the educational institution. I've also experienced this. Within my own university, I'm trying to get His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami some engagements in the university, in college preaching. I approached the philosophy club, the club where people have, free thought, a lot of brand new ideas, a lot of reflection on various issues. So they do this in this philosophy club. They talk about all these different things. So I approached the club, the people of the club, and they tell me that we only discuss secular topics. So because if you're affiliated with any religion, you're not allowed to speak at our club. This is the philosophy club, where it's free thought, open minds, whatever. But if you're part of any religion, if you believe in God, you're not allowed to talk. So this is ideology. This is absolutely bogus. And like this is the atheistic government, which was predicted and has, is currently progressing. Srila Prabhupada says, in this verse we're reading today, even these so-called saints in higher castes of these social orders, generally known as the Dvijajanas, or the twice-born, will become atheists. So in modern society, India being the pious land that it is,
These twice-born people, this culture is currently most preserved in India. So these people who are twice-born, they generally come out of India unless they're part of the ISKCON movement or Gaudiya Math, etc. But traditionally, all these twice-born people, they're of Indian descent, of Indian bodies. There's so many people coming from India. Well, even in India, it's becoming really westernized in itself. The educational institutions, the whole drive on, computer science, how India is completely pioneering the field of computer science. And then, of course, America is a pious land, so many people of higher births in India with, say more money, maybe of a higher caste, they tend to come to America because America is the land of prosperity and wealth and freedom, and there's lots of land here, land's more cheap, and fancy cars and the material dream here in America. And so lots of Indians, they come over here. Lots of Indians of Brahmana background, Kshatriya background, probably Vaishya background. People of Shudra background, they maybe don't have so much opportunity to come over to America. But once these people of Indian descent, they come over to America, they completely lose their caste. They completely lose all sense of Vedic culture. I remember speaking to this one gentleman who, Indian-bodied boy, he is of a Brahmana family. He's been he's been vegetarian for generations and generations. And here he is in America, his family's in India, he comes to America, and he starts eating meat, and he's a complete atheist. This is somebody I know. Just like that. This is Western culture. This is the pursuit of Kali Yuga. I also remember I was in the elevator one time, and there's a little gang of Indian boys. They were talking about what they did last night, how they partied, and they got so effed up, and it was like, oh, Vishnu was so drunk, bro. His parents were like freaking, like so angry, and So this is practical experience of, what Prabhupada says. Even the so-called saints and higher castes of these social orders, generally known as the Dvijajanas or the twice-born, will become atheists. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada continues. The higher castes of society, namely the intelligent class of men, guiding the destinies of the social orders, the administrative class of men, guiding the law and order of the society, and the productive class of men, guiding the economic development of the society, must be properly well-versed in knowledge of the Supreme Lord, knowing factually His name, qualities, pastimes, entourage, paraphernalia, and personalities. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada is saying here that the purpose of these higher castes, they're given responsibility. And with great power comes great responsibility. So because they're given this responsibility, they're in charge of directing society as a whole towards Krishna consciousness, towards piety, towards dharma. But we see today that this isn't the case. Rather, the people who have the power, the people who are held responsible, completely mislead the civilization. As Prahlad Maharaj says, Nate vidu svartagatim hi vishnum durashya ye bahirartha mananaha andha vicha andhayatan upaniyamanas te pishatantyamurudam nibadhaha. That, people in today's age, they're completely misguided. They don't seek after the philosophical truth. They value material sense gratification. And the leaders of such a society, they're blind men who lead the followers of them. The blind men, they fall into a ditch, and their followers similarly just fall into a ditch. And so, rather than directing human beings towards Krishna consciousness, leaders of today's world, they simply mislead the whole population. Srila Prabhupada continues. The saints in the higher castes or orders of the society are judged by their proportion of knowledge in the science of God, or tattva jnana, and not by any kind of birthright or bodily designations. Such designations, without any knowledge of the science of God and practical knowledge of devotional service, are considered to be all decorations of dead bodies. And when there is too much inflation of these decorated dead bodies in society, there develop so many anomalies in the progressive, peaceful life of the human being. In relation to this point Srila Prabhupada is making about dead bodies, this verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam earlier in this Canto 2, Chapter 3, Text 21. Bharav param patta kirita jushtam api uttamangalam nanamen mukundam shavau karo no kurute saparyam harir lasat kanchana kankanova. Translation: the upper portion of the body, though crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden if not bowed down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti, freedom. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man, if not engaged in the service of the personality of Hari. Krishna is he who gives life. He is the source of all life. When not recognizing Krishna, then we are like dead men, in the sense that there's no spiritual prowess in the life of one who does not seek God consciousness. It's simply, the whole conception of life is based on the body, is just based off of dead matter. Therefore, they're considered to be dead men because their existence is simply in the realm of birth and death. So they're like dead men, and Sri Prabhupada's saying that it's if not bowed down, if you don't bow your body down to the personality of Godhead, the body is only a heavy burden. So this body, it's meant to engage in the service of Krishna, and Krishna, he carries us. He carries us. He's the source of life. So like that, he carries us. And if we aren't Krishna conscious and we try to do everything on our own and try to live a life of so-called independence, then we are simply carrying a heavy burden of our own faulty responsibility. Okay. Because of the lack of training or culture in the upper section of the social orders, they are no more to be designated as the Dvijajanas, or the twice-born. The significance of being twice-born has been explained in many places in great literature. And again, one is reminded herewith that birth executed by the sex life of the father and mother is called animal birth. But such animal birth and progress of life on the animal principles of eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, without any scientific culture of spiritual life, is called the Shudra life, or to be more explicit, the uncultured life of the lower class of men. So Srila Prabhupada says that the sexual intercourse between man and woman, it's an animalistic activity. And the child that comes out of that, practically an animal. And we see this, children, they're like animals, they're very instinctual, their intelligence hasn't kicked in, their minds are very immature. And so until they get cultured, then they are basically just animals. And this is Srila Prabhupada says, being twice born ends one's animal life and begins one's human life. Because this being twice born it's a samskara, it's an impression left on the mind. And these impressions are all pieces of Vedic culture. And so when we become twice born, then we are further immersed into the Vedic culture. And the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that one of the heavy statements that If you have children, but they don't become Krishna consciousness, then they're non-different from urine. Because it's simply a byproduct of the body. It's simply a byproduct of the body. If it's just within the realm of birth and death, producing another material body will just go along the cycle of samsara and just continue in this material world like that. It's absolutely useless. There's no progress. It's just birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Okay. So being twice born is very important. If one does not become twice born, or if one doesn't take up to the Vedic culture, then he remains a Shudra. Or if one doesn't take up God culture, he is a Shudra. So I'd like to ask, what are the characteristics of a Shudra? What is that? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Lamentation. Yeah, lamentation. What else? Characteristics of a Shudra. Mind is disturbed. Being uncultured. There's one big one. One more, I'll take one more and then I'll say what I'm thinking of. Uncleanliness? Yeah, that has to do with it. The overarching principle is a lack of discrimination. Shudras don't have discrimination. Therefore, they engage in illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, gambling like this. Well, Kshatriyas also gamble, so maybe not gambling. But yeah, this is what characterizes a Shudra, is a lack of discrimination. That you eat whatever, go wherever, whatever, lack of discrimination. One who's cultured, they see, okay, what is favorable, what is not favorable to the execution of dharma. And this is the impression of culture, because animals, they act purely off of instinct. They act purely off of instinct, no discrimination, no intelligence. But once we get conditioned by culture, then we have this discrimination. We know, okay, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And so this is culture. Until we take up culture, we are simply animals. But when we become cultured, we learn the codes of social conduct. And by this, this is the definition of human society, is that we have social conduct. We have social codes, morality. These are all characteristics of human society that come along with culture. Because culture essentially is a body of knowledge and a collection of traditions and customs and rituals that force the living entity to act in a particular way beyond just his sensory seeking. So this is culture. Srila Prabhupada continues. It is stated herein that the governmental power of society in the Kali Yuga will be passed over to the uncultured, godless laborer class of men, and thus the Nridevas, or the ministers of government, will be the Vrishalas, or the uncultured, lower class of society. So yeah, leaders today, they lack sense control. This is characteristic of a Shudra, is a lack of sense control also. And the Upadeshamrita Sindhu says, Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam, jifa vegam udaropasta vegam, etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira sarvam apimam prativim sashishyat. That when one can control the actions of the urges of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals, you can control the mind and the urge to speak. Once a person can do all these things, then he's qualified to make disciples all over the world. So this is what qualifies one as a leader, actually, is sense control. Doing the right thing even when your mind tells you not to do so. So this sense control is something that leaders of today's world don't have. If we're talking political leaders, there have been so many scandals, so many affairs that presidents have had sleeping with different women, different celebrities, models, and then what to speak of, you have these celebrities in the music industry, in the fashion industry, the film industry. These are the leaders of today's world. All materialistic people just seeking to satisfy their own senses. So this is what qualifies as Shudra: lack of discrimination, just wanting to satisfy your senses, going anywhere, doing anything just to satisfy your senses. And this is the essence of corruption, is just seeking to satisfy your own senses, using everything in your power to simply facilitate your sense gratification, rather than engaging everything in your power in Krishna's service, which these are antithetical, engaging things in Krishna's service and engaging things in your own sense gratification. We do desire to engage things in our own sense gratification, but we have to, through the impression of culture, through the social force of culture, we're supposed to not do just what we want, but do what's right. So engage everything, our fruits, in Krishna's service. Srila Prabhupada continues in our purport, no one can expect any peace and prosperity in a human society full of uncultured lower classes of men. The symptoms of such uncultured social animals are already in vogue. So the symptoms of such uncultured social animals are already in vogue. To be vogue means to be current. So it's already in vogue. This has already ensued. So in this relation, there's a passage from Kalki Leela, which is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, Text 2. And I will be reading verses 12 through 16, just the translation. By the time the age of Kali ends, the bodies of all creatures will be greatly reduced in size, and the religious principles of followers of Varnashram will be ruined. The path of the Vedas will be completely forgotten in human society, and so-called religion will be mostly atheistic. The kings will be mostly thieves, the occupations of men will be stealing, lying, and needless violence, and all the social classes will be reduced to the lowest level of Shudras. Cows will be like goats, spiritual hermitages will be no different from mundane houses, and family ties will extend no further than the immediate bonds of marriage. Most plants and herbs will be tiny, and all trees will appear like dwarf shami trees. Clouds will be full of lightning, homes will be devoid of piety, and all human beings will have become like asses. At that time, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear on the earth. Acting with the power of pure spiritual goodness, he will rescue eternal religion. So in this purport, the first thing Srila Prabhupada mentions is that the bodies of all creatures will greatly reduce in size. And this is something we already see. Everybody nowadays is constantly on the computer, just slouching over like this, bad posture. And bad posture actually makes you shorter because it makes you like this, And so we see this, the reduction in size of the people. The next thing we see is in this purport is atheistic religion as Kali Yuga ensues. So nowadays, Buddhism is considered a religion, even though it's really not a religion, because the essence of religion is to surrender unto God. But Buddhists, they don't have a conception of God in this so-called religion. Another instance of atheistic religion is, there's a video that was posted in one of our group chats about I believe it was an Episcopalian church in San Francisco, where the preacher, the pastor, is preaching, God is gay, God is a lesbian, God is white, God is black, God is a homophobe, God is transgender, God is able-bodied, God is disabled. And then at the end, he says, God is you. You are God. And so this is preached at a so-called church. Very liberal, but this is complete Mayavad, complete nonsense. Complete atheism. You are God. God is you. God is lesbian, gay, transgender, homophobic. God is everything. Well, if God is everything, then, okay, I guess nothing is God. Because, there's no distinction. Where there's no distinction, there's no need for a term. The term God refers to a particular person. But if everything's God, then There's no God, actually. Everything is God, right? The next thing Srila Prabhupada mentions is family ties will be extended no further than the immediate bonds of marriage. And this is very common. Families are completely in disarray. I mean, we have a big population of single mothers who were abandoned by their so-called man. And they're just completely left alone to fend for themselves and their kids in a completely, terrible situation. This is very, very sad. And then we also see families broken up between political parties. It's very common, very common. Practically every family I know. I'm from here in Atlanta, we're in the deep south, so it's a relatively conservative place, but Atlanta is like this liberal hub. And many people within Atlanta that I know, just from growing up, they come from outside Atlanta, and they come from conservative families, but then they come to Atlanta and they become liberal. They come to Atlanta because it's liberal. And so you see families, they don't gather together because whenever they gather together, they get into some political argument and it gets really heated. And there's even hate. People are so divided between political parties. It's very common for instance, liberals to believe if you support Donald Trump, then you're genuinely a bad person. You shouldn't exist on the planet because you're only influencing things negatively. There are people that really think like this. And so when your family member is a Trump supporter, then completely, hate within the family. So yeah, families are broken up. Another instance of families not extending beyond the immediate family. Immediate family meaning the man and woman that unite in marriage. And the extended family meaning cousins, uncles, relatives, etc. I remember there was this song that came on the radio. It was one of these annoying pop songs they play 100 times a day on the radio. This was like 5 years ago maybe. It's a song called Rude by Magic. And it's basically about a man who falls in love with a girl and she's got like conservative parents and he's like some like cool guy with long hair. And he goes over to ask the father, "Can I marry your daughter?" And he says, "No." And so the chorus is like, "Marry that girl, marry her anyway, marry that girl, no matter what you say." So this is a pop song that's played on and on in the radio, completely disregarding family etiquette. Srila Prabhupada continues. No one can expect any peace and prosperity in a human society full of uncultured lower classes of men. The symptoms of such uncultured social animals are already in vogue, and it is the duty of the leaders of men to take note of it and try to reform the social order by introducing the principle of twice-born men trained in the science of God consciousness. So this is our responsibility to promote the culture of twice-born men, promote the culture of God-conscious science. This can be done by expanding the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. How do we expand the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam? Distribute Srimad Bhagavatam, of course. Not only distribute the Bhagavatam, but live the Bhagavatam. So that means Varnashram Dharma, farm communities, surrendering everything unto Krishna, following all the exemplary personalities found in this text, this compilation of history and philosophy. So we distribute the Bhagavatams, and Srila Prabhupada concludes this purport by saying, "In the degraded condition of human society, the Lord incarnates as the Kalki avatar and kills all the demons without mercy." So the Lord, He kills all the demons without mercy. Wow. Lord Chaitanya is the opposite of this because He's very merciful incarnation of God that incarnated just to spread love of God widely, no distinction between caste, fallen versus elevated. But Kalki Avatar, it says he mercilessly slays the demons. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, just to elaborate on this point of mercilessness, yeah. Canto 12, chapter 2, text 19 through 20. So this is in the purport. At the end of Kali Yuga, the same God will appear as the mighty Kalki Avatar and beat the pollution out of the demons. So he came, this is the end of Kali Yuga, he came and killed the atheists to ensue the next Satya Yuga. So it says he beat the pollution out of the demons. Unlike, say, Krishna, for instance, those he kills, they get liberation. Kalki Avatar, they further continue in the material world, if I'm not mistaken. And so what is real mercy? Real mercy is love of God. Real mercy is having bestowed that valuable jewel whereby everything else seems like pieces of broken glass. So this valuable jewel is the seed of devotional service. So when we really gain the mercy of the Supreme Lord, we gain access to His devotional service. We gain the association of devotees. This is the real mercy. Whereas Kalki Avatar, that wasn't his specific function. He came to ensue the next Satya Yuga. So this is said to be merciless because, those that he killed, they didn't get liberation. They didn't get love of God. They were reincarnated. So this was the function of Kalki Avatar. I hope my class wasn't too spaced out. I'll take any questions and comments and corrections, please. Mataji's? Oh, Nick?
Can you just speak loud? Hare Krishna. It works? Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a point about culture.
You can give him this one too. You speak both.
Yeah, 'cause
Do both. You have to do both.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, you mentioned a point of culture, and I just read in the Journey of Self-Discovery that Prabhupada says that real culture means understanding the goal of life, the aim of life. And I also remember reading that Prabhupada saying culture is Varnashram Dharma. So it's interesting that even some sinners in the ISKCON movement, they try to divorce the practice of Krishna consciousness from Varnashram Dharma. But what ends up happening is they forget the aim of life, the goal of life in doing so. And you practically see, I think Mahosabha was saying that, I think it was LA, he said they had demigods on the altar. And you see that what happens is when you don't institute Varnashram Dharma within the Krishna consciousness movement, that's what gradually happens. You forget the aim of Krishna consciousness because that's just like the skeleton. Varnashram Dharma is like the skeleton that holds it up. So that's a good point you were making about, I just want to just highlight that about culture supporting Krishna consciousness. No, not LA. He said it was some temple. No, I didn't say LA. It's kind of some temple in LA. Yeah, no, I don't remember what temple. Yeah. Sorry, I want to clarify that. Not ISKCON LA. Not ISKCON LA.
Okay, yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
So, one clarification is I was talking about LA, but it was not ISKCON LA. It was another temple in LA that devotees had started. And these people used to be devotees, initiated disciples of a particular guru, and they've made a big mess of it. So the other point also is that, like you were speaking about Jita Girish Prabhu, how in your philosophy class there's like, you're not allowed to like speak about religion. You can speak about anything else, free thought, free everything, but but you're not free. It's not free, because that is their religion is to not believe in God. That's their religion. And based on that religion, they build up all this other nonsense. It's completely bogus, actually. And then we also see that, you were speaking about how like all these Indians were like in your elevator and they're like, oh, your Vishnu got so drunk and all this.
Yeah.
And the parents were so mad. But ultimately, it's the parents' fault. If you bring your kid to such a place like this, and then you throw them into public school and other schools like that, what do you expect is going to happen? And then like a thing which was so degraded in the past and their family they would never accept is now they just accept it like it's a common thing. So it's completely bogus.
Yeah.
And it's a fault of the parents. And their only hope is to buy those books from us. Their only hope is to support the Christian conscious movement. Their only hope is to join the Christian consciousness movement. Otherwise, children will soon become like animals. You won't be able to distinguish them. And I was in Chicago, just a few weeks ago, and the second generation or third generation Indians, they just have like the skin of an Indian, but on every level, on their behavior, their attitude, everything, they're just like Americans, and I wouldn't be surprised if they eat cows and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Christian consciousness movement is the only hope.
Definitely. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Any other points? Avadut Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. This is just a comment, but on the topic of Dvijas, I heard that there are actually 3 different kinds of Dvijas.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, there's the, oh, look at that. Magnetic. You're saying the mother and father, Prabhupada was talking about this in the purport, and they're giving birth to a child, and, they're basically like an animal, but this Dvija being taken second birth from a bona fide spiritual master, and there's that one Dvija, and then another Dvija is a bird, actually, because the bird is born as an egg, and then the egg later hatches. And the third kind of Dvija I heard is actually teeth.
Oh.
Because you're born with baby teeth, and then you have another set twice born.
Nice.
It's just a comment.
Fun
but
facts.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. A lecture.
Thank you. Machijis have any points? Yes, please.
Have to speak.
My question is, you mentioned that after Kali Yuga, Kalki comes, and then Satya Yuga restarts. So what does that consist of? Is there any people left after Kalki comes?
Yes.
Like, how does that work?
Yes, there are. It's only the demoniac kings that are slain, I believe. I can pull it up. Okay, one sec. Yeah, another thing, it describes how after Kalki Avatar comes, then the smell of sandalwood the aroma is present throughout the battlefield. Sorry, I'm just trying to. After all the impostor kings have been killed, the residents of the cities and towns will feel the breezes carrying the most sacred fragrance of the sandalwood paste and other decorations of Lord Vasudeva, and their minds will thereby become transcendently pure. When Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears in their hearts in his transcendental form of goodness, the remaining citizens will abundantly repopulate the earth. When the Supreme Lord has appeared on earth as Kalki, the maintainer of religion, Satya Yuga will begin, and human society will bring forth progeny in the mode of goodness. Yes, Mother. Is there anything else? Okay. Kalki Avatar ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Vancha kalpa tiripyascha kripa santubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.